going to say, while we're waiting, if anybody wants to drop in where they're located, what they teach, what grades, things like that in the chat, they can. And then, yeah, Jeff, whenever you're ready, we can get started.
I'm going to kick this off. All right, well, good afternoon to all our friends on the East Coast and here in Central Time, and good morning to our West Coast people. I guess if you're Mountain Time, I guess you're still afternoon, right? Just barely, but you are afternoon. Welcome to our Cyber.org's lesson and case study deep dive from cybersecurity. My name is Jeff Holcomb, and with me today is Brandon Sally. We'll kick off today with just little introductions, and then we'll kind of jump into the lesson. Like I said, my name is Jeff Holcomb. I've been working with cyber for probably about 15 years, pretty much since they were started. I spent most of that time in the same position you guys are in right now as a teacher, working with their curriculum, going to their camps, doing special projects with them. Then after that, I worked at the district level as a science supervisor, and then also as a STEM specialist. And again, able to work with cyber in that capacity as well. We were able to take their curriculum and the projects and spread them out district-wide. So it's been really great for that. After I worked with the district for a little while, I went into the State Department of Louisiana, and again, worked with cyber to develop career pathways in cybersecurity. And then after I left that, I was a CTE supervisor, and once again worked with cyber to develop career pathways for our district folks. So as you can see, I'm a big fan of cyber. It's been a great help. They've been really great for me, my personal growth as well as career growth. So I just started working for them about 2 months ago, and I'm just really excited to be here. Brandon?
Thanks. So I have kind of a similar path, not quite as lengthy as Jeff's was, but started with actually teaching professional development workshops in STEM and science. My bachelor's is in biology, while my master's is in education and curriculum. So did that, and then after teaching teachers for several years, decided to go into the classroom, went into the classroom, started more traditional science and STEM with biology, chemistry, forensics, and then got over into teaching the cyber.org courses. Got into robotics quite a bit, assisted with their competitions, designing challenges and different things like that. And after teaching it for a few years, getting used to it and things like that, decided to hop on board and actually be one of the curriculum writers. So here I am. It's been a little bit over a year and a half writing that, but now I'm one of the curriculum developers, and then also do quite a bit of work with the cyber.org range. So if you end up having questions about either one of those, you can let me know.
And you can see on the screen here, we do have our emails. If you need to reach out to us, you're more welcome to do that. We'll also throw that up at the end of the session as well. All right, so what we're looking at today, we're going to do just kind of an overview of the cybersecurity curriculum. We'll do a lab on ransomware, and then look at a couple of case studies that kind of go along with what we're talking about today. So let's kind of look at this as who we are and why we exist at cyber.org. And you can see from the slide here, we are the academic arm of the Cyber Innovation Center. Just give you a little background on really what's going on here is we are located in the northwest corner of Louisiana, and literally a mile from us is Barksdale Air Force Base. We got B-52s flying directly over our building every day. So we're really closely related with the Air Force. In around 2006, the Air Force decided they were going to stand up a new command for a new cyber command. And Barksdale was really in the running for that. And Barksdale was so close to getting, we were actually the provisional site for the cyber command for a while. But when that all came about, some civic leaders and our governor and people from the state really saw a need to provide a pipeline for the students in our area to support that mission from the Air Force, because we knew that they were going to be here. Lots of high-tech companies were going to be coming, so we wanted to do something to support that, and that's where we kind of came up with the Cyber Innovation Center. And of course, they do a lot of other things too. So the academic part of that, you can see our main goals here really is to provide these educational resources, build that pipeline, and address the cybersecurity workforce shortage. Well, it kind of turned out that we didn't get the command. I think it ended up going to Lackland and by San Antonio, but that didn't really change anything because this whole idea of the cybersecurity workforce shortage isn't unique to Northwest Louisiana or Louisiana in general. It's a nationwide issue. So we just kind of continued on with that and expanded. Now we get most of our funding from DHS and the Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agent, CISA. So you can thank them for all these materials and stuff that you're going to learn about today or have you already learned about from cyber.org. So I know most of you have probably been to our workshops before or done some of this stuff, but we'll just kind of go over this again real quick. We have a QR code here. If you click on, or if you go to that site, you'll be able to sign up for our curriculum access. Usually we recommend that you use one of your school emails just because it's going to make it a lot easier for us to vet you and make sure you can have access to it. Because we are funded by DHS, we do try to limit this to K through 12 teachers in the US. But if you have some other issues going on, let us know. We may still be able to help you with that. So once you get on, you can see, you can just log in. I'll jump out of this and go to my dashboard. So once you get your curriculum access, you'll see something like this. I believe, Brandon, this is the default, right? Everybody gets an elementary, middle, and high school
Yes,
folder.
and it was actually just, there was an update pushed out last night. So if anybody has been on Canvas and you had your classes favorited, those favorites get reset when there's an update.
And I'll show you how to do favorites in just a second. But so once you sign up, you should get something that looks similar to this, right? And like Brandon said, there's favorites that you can do. So we'll kind of show you how to clean this up, make it a little more streamlined for you if you choose to do this. But before you do that, it's really kind of good to go through, peruse this, see what all we have, because a lot of our stuff is modular and you can kind of go through and pick some things out that you may or may not need. I think today, most of you are probably doing cybersecurity. And there may be a scenario where you look at it and say, hey, my kids can't handle that. What can I do to help them? And, we do have like the intro to cybersecurity. So you can always kind of go back and remediate and see what else is out there that you may be able to use in your classroom as well. So again, to make this a favorite, you can see this is probably your default. If you come over here to the courses side and just click on all courses, you'll see this lists everything that we have, and there's little stars over here that you can click on. So what I'm going to go do is I'm just going to uncheck these three. And today I'm really just interested in cybersecurity, so I'll just favorite that one. Now when I go back to my dashboard, you'll see it. I just have that one. So you can kind of streamline this and clean it up a little bit for your own use. And then if you do click on this, I will point out, I don't think it works if you click down here. You do need to click on the little icon here. If you click on that, it should pop up with what the course looks like. So we're looking at cybersecurity today. We got it broke down into our units. One thing also I kind of point out here about our units is, this is how we have it set up. CompTIA has them by domains. If you want to kind of see how the domains are lined out, we do have that set up for you also. So if you click right here on the CompTIA Security Plus Objective Order, you can flip down to here and kind of look and see how it is in order. This can also be useful sometimes, Brandon might say to me, hey, today we're going to do, let's do 1.4.4 obfuscation and steganography. Well, it's easy for me to jump down here and just go 144 because it's lined out like this. If I come back to just the home page, sometimes it can be a little more difficult to locate. But we'll jump back to this one real quick and just kind of go over a couple of things here that you can do with this. We do have the objectives laid out here. And one other thing I'll point out before we do anything else is we do still have some 601 content or 601 content here. So if you're still on that, or you want to go back and pull some lessons from that, that is still available to you. Every unit has a lesson plan that comes along with it, and those can come in really, really handy. So let me click on Unit 1 lesson plan here. So you can see it comes up, gives you a nice little unit interview overview, what the student's going to do. So then you got some objectives and resources, everything that you'll need to do this. Also, they give you some opening questions that you can do. You can use these either in your lesson or use these as like bell ringers or something along those lines. Then you come down and look at this, you can have all your lesson goals for each and individual one, which is great for those of you that have are in districts where they require you to post your objectives on the board, right? So we have all that available for you. Now, again, depending on your district, this may or may not suffice as a lesson plan. My advice usually is if you're doing this, I wouldn't say just print this out and put it on your desk. Probably, most admin probably wouldn't accept that. But if you print this out, put it on your desk, and then go through and annotate it so they know that you're actually planning from this and working from this, they're more likely to accept it as your lesson plan. Go through it right on there. Hey, we're doing a case study today. Today, I'm going to make sure Johnny has his Chromebook, his headphones, so he can have it read aloud to him. So I think this would work very well as a lesson plan for a lot of districts, as long as you go through and annotate with it. And then some other things that you'll notice you do, we have our lesson notes, which are great for background. So you can hop on here, read through this before you do it, get a good background so you got some good knowledge to do this. Some teachers actually print this out and give it to their students as well. So, or load it up to their Canvas page. Then we also have some guided notes that go along with the lesson. So if you come up here, look, we got some nice little questions that go along here. And again, you can use this in two ways. You can take this and hand it out to them as you go over the PowerPoint, have them fill it in as they go along, or go through the PowerPoint and then have them fill it out later. Of course, we have an answer key that goes along with that, and then PowerPoint that will go with it as well. And then finally, to close it out, we can also have a little quiz. Each quiz has about 10 multiple choice questions that go along with it, obviously with the key. So again, you can use that in multiple ways. You could set up a test to go along with it, or maybe even use this as your bell ringers as well. Okay, Brandon, I think that pretty much covers the part. So if you want to hop on and do something with the range, you want me to quit sharing?
Yes, you share, and then I will go in.
Next week more. Yeah.
All right. So before we get started in the activities, a little bit of background information about the range. If you're familiar with the range, then great. Move some windows around here. So I did drop both links in. So you'll have to, if you haven't signed up for curriculum access and range access, you have to do those separately. As Jeff was saying, make sure you use your school email to help with the vet process to get you approved and in there. During this PD, we will use the range. We're going to start off with, since we're focusing on case studies, we'll start with a case study, but I want to kind of go ahead and get the background information on the range out there. If you've seen us use it, you know how to use it, you have an account, then great. For those that do not know about it, think of it as essentially a sandboxed environment to practice using different cybersecurity techniques, applications, and experience the attack side, especially. It allows students to practice this through a browser. There's no software needed to download and install. As long as your school can get access to apps.cyber.org, then you're good to go. In fact, the range doesn't even touch the school's network. It's all running through that website. So it's all virtualized from that website. As you use it, it is one of the nice features about it, and you'll see with the lab that we do today, often the labs will do something where the machine ends up being useless at the end and essentially will brick the machine or break the machine in some way, shape, or form. But with the range, all you have to do is terminate the machine, hit launch, and once you launch relaunch the machine, you have a nice fresh image to work with. So you're able to practice the malicious things, undergo some of the cyber attacks that are similar to the one seen in the real world. In case today, we're going to perform a ransomware attack on one of our machines. And so you'll get to go through all the steps, see it in action, see how that's performed without risking any damage to your actual physical school devices. And there's nothing, like I said, being on the school network. So you don't have to worry about anybody from the IT department coming down and knocking on your door. So that's the range kind of in a quick nutshell there. But we're going to move on to the case studies. And so with the case studies, this is a portion of the cybersecurity course. They're meant to bring in actual real world scenarios. They're based on articles that were published. What we've done is taken the article and put it in PDF format, so you don't have to worry about the article being locked behind a paywall or some kind of subscription, membership, anything like that. So you get the full article. You also get a summary of the article at the bottom. So going along with what Jeff was saying about having lesson plans and things like that, often if you're an elective teacher, you have several courses to teach, several preps. So you may not get to read everything the day before or the night before. You actually go to teach it. So if you need a refresher on the article, there's a nice little paragraph summary to give you an idea about what it's about. And then there's a set of discussion questions that are meant to drive kind of debate among the students. I always tell people when talking about the case studies that students are going to argue and debate back and forth, regardless of what the topic and who it's with. But instead of having them argue and debate you, have them debate and argue with each other. So that's where the questions come in. You as the teacher and we as the presenter, and we try to do this during the workshops, is we try to stay biased and not lead them in one direction based on the case study and how the questions are set up. We're really trying to get their opinion and try to get them to come to a conclusion about what the answers to these should be. And then below that, at the end of each PDF, you'll find a list of additional articles. Some of those may be put behind a paywall or subscription membership or something like that. Some are free, it just varies, but they are additional links to articles that tie into the same subjects. And so for today, we're going to look, first case study we're going to look at is the malware case study. So this actually, let's see, I'm going to take it and drop it, not all the files. Drop the case study. And so just in case you do not have access to the curriculum yet, or you're going through that process, that's the actual case study that we'll use. So if you click on that, open it up, you'll see what I was talking about the portions. There's a link to the original article, the full article, the summary, the questions, and then the additional links at the end. But background information on that. So this case study discusses what happens to Marcus Hutchins after he saved the world from the WannaCry ransomware virus. And so a little bit of background information on that, and it talks about some of this in the article. If you're unfamiliar with Marcus, he is kind of a celebrity in the cybersecurity world. There's a few of us here at cyber.org that actually got to meet him in person. I was unfortunately not one of them, and I'm still kind of jealous about that, but that's okay. He started out fairly young. You probably have students like this that like to tinker, work with computers, test things out. And so he started young doing that. Started writing scripts, learning how to program, do various things. And eventually he kind of got into the malicious side. And so he ended up creating a piece of malware and ended up selling it. And that's kind of what the article focuses on. But he quickly realized after he did that side of things that he realized that was not really the moral thing to do. He decided to change gears and switch over to actually being a cybersecurity analyst. So he wanted to prevent things like this from occurring. So he started working for a company. He's actually from the UK. He was working for a company there. And then in 2017, WannaCry hit. So if you're unfamiliar with it, this is the actual lab that we'll go through after this case study. It originated in Asia and kind of spread across Asia, hit Europe, and actually hit a few systems in the US. Overall, it's estimated to hit over 230,000 systems across the globe. It spread very quickly because of a couple of exploits that were really not known. They weren't patched, and there were several systems that were out of date. So it was able to self-spread and infect various systems. And it also hit targets that were pretty crucial to countries, things like hospitals, various infrastructure agencies, things like that. And so suddenly you have to imagine a hospital that is suddenly locked out of all their patient records, or they can't run the machines that are needed to do perform the care needed for their patients throughout the day. To cause a huge just shutdown of things. It is often described as almost taking down the internet. It was after that, during this time, that Marcus started to realize, he started researching it, of course. It hits all the feeds for the professionals in that area. And he realizes that the WannaCry virus had to reach out to this specific domain before it was activated. And while doing that, he also realized that essentially that domain didn't exist. No one owned that domain. It wasn't an actual website or anything. And so what he did was he purchased the domain for a little bit over $10, between $10 and $11. And then he shut it down. And by doing that, it essentially acted as a kill switch. It kept the WannaCry payload from actually spreading. So the systems that still had it on there were still affected. And there were still issues, but he at least quit it from spreading to any other system. It couldn't be activated on any other system. And so for this, then other people started working on it. They were able to kind of recover systems and reverse engineer the virus at that point. But this made him an instant celebrity. And with being popular and being a celebrity comes other things. So people wanted to know who this was. So they started looking into his history, and that is kind of where the article picks up. So you have that. So what we're going to do is give you about 10 minutes, and we're going to put you in, I'm going to stop sharing, put you in breakout rooms. All right. I think we got everyone back. All right, so hopefully everyone got a chance to read the article, at least read over the questions. So we'll go over the questions now, and hopefully we get some discussion out of them. But the ones that do go with this, so the first question is, and it's a two-part question. You can answer any part of it in the chat. You feel free to come off mute. If not, Jeff and I'll just sit here and argue with each other and see who can prove each other wrong. So the first one, should it be legal to create malware? And then part two, what if you never actually use the malware? Anybody have an opinion on that? Whether or not it should be legal to create malware? And then the added addition of what happens if you never actually use it in a malicious way?
Well, we talked in our group about the possibility that it should be legal to create it. Because what if you're trying to teach your students how to defend against it, and you create something to be used in a lab environment, and that's all you use it for?
It's a great point. So you go ahead.
Yeah, you're going to need to have a lab environment, because there's always going to be people doing it illegally, and you need to be able to catch them, right? So you need to test it yourself. So I guess it's legal if you don't use it for malintentions, and illegal if you do, whether you create it or not. So it's the intention, I guess, which is what should be illegal.
And that's great point.
Yeah, I don't know if it's still this way, but when I first started teaching and the phones, everybody started using phones, I looked into like making a cell phone jammer. And it was legal to make one and own one, but it was illegal to actually use it.
Yeah.
Kind of goes along with this.
Yeah, so and with this question, you almost have to kind of dissect the definition of malware. Like, what is actually considered malware? Is it actually malicious, or is it the intent of, what's behind it? If you're creating a piece of software, it's really just software. It doesn't become malware until it's used in a malicious way. So if you're trying to educate someone on it, then you need to know how something functions. Um, I always like to add to the discussion, as far as like think about it, as Marcus and people who work in that job or in that career field, they're to be able to know the enemy and know who they're trying to work against, they're going to have to be able to create these things. They're going to have to try to find their own exploits and create their own pieces of malicious software that can do certain things. They have to keep up with what's currently out there. If not, they run the risk of falling behind, allowing essentially the enemy to get ahead of them, and then they're not able to perform their job as well. So there's also that aspect as well, is you kind of have to keep training. You have to not only know what's out there, but keep evolving your own set of tools and things like that as you go to combat these things. So the next question is, and this one's probably going to be a little bit easier, less debate on this one. Should it be legal to sell malware to others?
Well,
So, Jeff,
again, it depends. What if you're selling it to an educational institution to further their, the teacher may not have the ability themselves to create this malware, but you do, and you can sell it to them to use in their lab or to a school district to use to teach students how to do this.
Yep. So if you created essentially a tool to educate, you could use it in that way.
But it could also be used for malware. I mean, the same tool could be used to educate, or it could be used to, as ransomware.
And we're saying when it's used in a malicious way, it should be illegal. Whether the seller or the buyer uses it in a legal way, it should be illegal. But if they're using it for teaching or to learn, then it should be legal.
And when we get into the range here shortly, this particular lab doesn't have any kind of terms of service or anything like that. But a few of the tools that we use in the range, when you first open them up, they actually have a terms of service. And they say in there that the tool is meant to be used for educational purposes only, not to be used in an actual malicious way. And you have to agree to that terms to use the tool. It kind of protects the person who created that particular tool. And the tools we use are, in the case of the range, are all open source. They're not actually sold or anything. The people have created these things specifically for educational purposes. So that would be important. If you were going to get in, I guess, into the malware business and tool business, is to make sure when you have your paperwork, contracts, terms of service, things like that in order. Because you don't want to be caught in a situation where someone took it and used it in a way that you maybe didn't foresee occurring, and then them trying to put the blame back on you. The next question is, and this plays on more of Marcus' situation. Should a judge consider good deeds a hacker has done when committing a crime? And this could really be applied to just about any crime. You have situations pop up quite a bit in the judicial system, and they make the news where it's somebody maybe did something in their past, but they've been doing good since then. So what do y'all think?
I think and our group said, we think we need these people. So if we make it harder for them to, help us by punishing them, we're not going to get their help, right? So if they're doing good things, we need their expertise. So we want to be lenient on them.
It's a
And
good
I
point.
think as far as judges and things, they always consider, if you had a DUI when you were 18 and now you're 22 and you haven't had any other infractions, what are they going to do? They're probably going to go really easy on you because you had it then, you're older now, and you haven't had any infractions since. You know what I mean? That is considered, it's considered when letting people out of prison, even good behavior,
Yep. And so, and this all did occur in the U.S., so we're, all fairly familiar with the judicial process in the U.S. So even though it was a UK citizen, and there's quite a bit of things that resulted from this. So if you're not familiar with his entire um, record, and this will kind of lead into the next question, Marcus is actually still in the United States. He's not allowed to leave the United States even to this day, due to this particular case. So he's still kind of actually prevented from going home. So he's made a career and a life in the U.S. He actually just a few weeks ago retired from a position that he was working in. He was a programmer for a cybersecurity consulting company, I believe. But
So
I
is
also
he,
think,
so is he
yes,
like have an in-house arrest or something like that, or in
yes,
country, or?
it is kind of like that, and I can go and bring up the next question. Because the article doesn't go into too much of the detail, but should he receive jail time or fines for creating and selling the Kronos malware? So before I tell you exactly what happened to him, what are your thoughts on that?
I think he needs to try to return any money that was stolen or stuff like that. Try to, make it right as much as he can.
And that is pretty much exactly what he did when he was first arrested and charged. First off, it kind of caught him off guard. He was actually arrested right after, well, not right after, but prior, he was about to travel back to the UK. So he was in the US, he was in Las Vegas for DEF CON. If you're familiar with that, it's a huge conference. They invite hackers and cybersecurity professionals, people from all over the globe, to attend this conference. And of course, being who he was invited to come in and speak. He comes in, speaks, does his airtime, and then uh, wakes up on the day he plans on flying back. And as he's getting ready to pack and things like that, gets a knock at the door, thinks it's actually food being delivered if I remember the story correctly, and opens the door and it's the FBI standing there. So imagine, you're waiting for your Uber Eats and you open the door and it's not what you ordered. It is a federal agent waiting to put you in cuffs. Of course, it kind of threw him off at first. He didn't realize what was going on until he was formally charged, and they let him know why he was being arrested. Then it kind of clicked. They get into the trial, and he did pretty much say, yes, I did this. I did sell it for this amount. One thing to take into account is he started doing this around 14 years old. So picture if you teach that age group, or really any teenager, just imagine a teenager who has this capability, and they're able to create something and sell it for like $4,000. It's kind of almost like what teenager wouldn't do that, because they may not think of what's going to happen down the road with something malicious. But he did, working in the career field, realize it was something he did that was wrong. He paid the fines. There were actually several fines involved. He didn't necessarily receive any formal jail time apart from being the actual arrest portion, but he was put on house arrest. So he had to remain in the U.S. So it's been a kind of a stressful situation. Like I said, he ended up actually still furthering his career. Ended up living in California, establishing himself fairly well. He's still well known still does what he does. Like I said, he just retired, but it's kind of one of those things that is stuck with him because he is limited to travel, so he's not allowed to leave the country just yet. I'm not sure if there's an actual end date on that, but he does remain
when you say
positive.
when you say retired, isn't he like in his upper 20s?
Yes, so he just retired from that position, or well, really more of a resigned um from that position, but he does he has made quite a bit of money from being famous and what he's done and stuff like that. So he posted. You can actually follow him on LinkedIn. He actually created a post where he said he was to the point where he had been programming and scripting for so long, for several years now. He was reaching a point of burnout, and so he wanted to take a break from it. So he resigned from his current position. He's just going to take a break from it, step back, work on some personal projects, and then he'll look into getting back into that career later on once he gets that break from it. So, but he's actually, if you did meet him, the one, like I said, a few of us here have met him, just not me. Everybody says he's like one of the most down to earth guys you would ever meet. I always refer to him as the Paul Rudd of cybersecurity because the guy never ages. He always looks the same and always has that upbeat attitude. Uh, so that's the malware case study. It's really interesting. Some other things and other courses that you can tie into this is in the Intro to Cybersecurity course, there is a lesson on the trial of Eternal Blue that talks about some of the exploits that actually led to the creation of the WannaCry payload. So it talks about some of the parties that were involved um, before it became WannaCry and before he stopped it. And then it also has a tie-in to some of the Darknet Diaries series. So if you're not familiar with those, it's a series of podcasts that are incorporated in the Intro to Cybersecurity course. But there's over 100 episodes, and the host does a great job at breaking down some of the topics. So he has several topics on WannaCry, topics on Marcus Hutchins, as well as some of the others. And we have a second case study we'll look at. There also there's an episode that covers that particular one that I'll talk about once we get to it. So with the case study, what we'll do is switch gears a little bit, and we're going to get into the range and actually deploy some ransomware. So hopefully you're excited for that. I'm going to drop in the chat set of logins. And so if you click on that PDF, and then you can go to apps.cyber.org. And what I'm going to do is actually switch screens. So on that sheet, you should see your name listed. You're going to have, actually, I can just open it up and show you. I'll move this window over. So you'll look for your name. The key thing is you want your username. So you're going to look for your username, and then everybody's password is capital malware, so just to make it easy. So you're going to go to apps.cyber.org and log in with those credentials. And when you first log in, you're going to get a window that looks just like this. You're going to see Classrooms with a button that has my name -PD. And so this is our account that we use for workshops and demonstrations. Once you're in there, and if you have any problems logging in, just you feel free to come off mute or drop something in the chat and we'll try to help you out. You'll click on this button and you should see a list of machines that looks like this. I've already fired up the Kali Linux machine and the Windows 7 machine. Those are the two that we'll be using for this particular lab. And so if you, I'll go through all the steps of the lab and how to actually basically prep the payload of WannaCry. It's in a course folder. It's in a zip folder. So we have to unzip it, prep it, move it over to a server, start the server, and then we're going to play the victim with the Windows 7 machine. If you don't want to necessarily do the setup part, you can watch me do the setup part, and you can actually still play the victim. I always mention that to teachers because it's something fun that you could set up before your class even starts, and you could have it hosted and ready to go if you just wanted to showcase this portion for a particular class, and then you wanted to get into like the nitty-gritty technical details of setting it up later in the year. So you could have it set up, ready to go, and they just simply play the victim. And the file, it will not. Okay. So let's see. Back to this. So if you look, there should be at the bottom. So Peggy, if you could use, copy this. If you could use that, well, ignore that semicolon. I'm not sure what that semicolon, where that came from. And then, is it pronounced Reina? You can use the semicolon up here again, delete it that time, that one. And so those are some of the backup usernames. And let me know if neither one of those work. Once you get in there, just click on my name and then you should see the list. So before we connect to a machine, so if you have hit this blue button over here that says connect, hit the back button and try to get back to this list. Once you're at this list, since we do use 2 machines, little trick that we like to make sure all teachers know is we're going to duplicate this entire tab. So in your browser, in the tab, you're going to hit right click and hit duplicate. Based on your browser, it may say duplicate tab, but in just about 99% of the cases, every browser is going to say duplicate in some form or fashion. So now we have 2 windows that we can toggle back and forth easily. In the first window, you're going to hit connect to the Kali and let it load. Once it loads, you should see something similar to this. Then you're going to click back on the second tab and click connect to the Windows 7 machine and let it load. And once it loads, you're fine. But this way we can go back and forth easily, and we do not have to do any kind of back and forth using the other machines button. Just so you do know, you can click other machines here and see how I can toggle back and forth here. But there is a delay because you're having to wait for that machine to load its screen each time. So it's a little bit faster this way. So to start us off, click on the terminal button, the black and white icon in the top left corner. It'll take a second for it to load. If you need the text to be bigger, you can hit Control-Shift+, and you can hit it a few times to make the text larger. Extend the window out. And like I said, the first thing we do for this is we have to get to where we store the WannaCry payload. And so that we need to change directory. So a simple CD command. And then you're going to type out course. And instead of typing the entire name, it's in a directory called course files, and then it's in a couple of subdirectories. If you type the first few letters and hit tab, it will autofill the name of the directory. And that's going to be really helpful here in a second, because when you look at the WannaCry payload, the actual name, it doesn't say WannaCry. It's about 32 random characters. It's like ED01 and then a bunch of characters after that. So course files, don't hit enter just yet. You're going to then type in cybersecurity. And again, you can tab to autocomplete. After that, you'll type in lowercase ransomware. So if I just type in the first few characters, it's ransomware lab. And then capital WA for WannaCry and hit tab. So CD, course files, cybersecurity, ransomware, lab, WannaCry, and then hit enter. And notice our directory has changed. up here where we're at. We do a quick ls, a list command, hit enter. You can see that we have 4 files in here. The 2 at the top that say have MD5 and SHA-256 at the end are what's called the hash files. So those are essentially so that when we downloaded it, it's a way for us to check the hash sum of the file to make sure we actually have the file that we think we're downloading. It's included with several different software packages, so really nothing to look at, and we just leave them there just to leave them in there. Then we have the zip file. This is what we want to get into. However, this is a password protected zip file. And so, okay, still waiting for Linux to load. They should. Let's see. Go back here. They should be loaded. So I see there's a Windows Server and Ubuntu, but we just need the Windows 7 and the Kali Linux. So those should be going. So to get this password, we have to read this file here to tell what is in there, because that's going to give us the password. So we're going to use the command cat, which stands for concatenate. I'm going to type in ransomware. I'm going to hit tab, and notice it stops at the period. So even though we have 4 files that all have the same name, what it'll do is Linux will autofill up until the point that there's a difference in the name of the file. So it stops there, and so then we just have to type in pass, and if you hit enter, it will simply print the password. So concatenate, what it does is combining the contents of the file, in this case it's just text, with the terminal, and so it prints that text in the terminal. So you see it's infected. So that is our password. We want to unzip this file. So the command for that is simply unzip and then the name of the file. Again, tab to autocomplete, and then I just have to add that extension, that zip. I hit enter, and it's going to ask me for the password. Notice this is the name. I think I said like 32 characters. That's much more than 32. So this is the name of the file. And then here we have to type in the password. So the password's infected. A security feature of Linux is when you type in a password in terminal, it will not show you what you're typing. So it will not even show you an asterisk. So it's to prevent anybody that happens to be looking at your screen, looking over your shoulder, they can't even see how many characters it is. So I'm going to type in infected. Notice the cursor does not move or change. I hit enter, and it says inflating. And so now if I do an ls, we went from 4 files to 5. So we had this, and this is the executable file that we need. I don't know about you all. I'm not going to try to type this in as the victim. So the next step in the lab is to actually rename this file. We can use the move command as long as we don't specify where we're moving it. We can do mv. You need the name of the file, so all we have to do is type in E, because it's the only file in this directory that actually starts with E. So if we type E and hit tab, it will auto-complete the name of that file for us. After that, we're going to rename it something much easier, ransomware.exe. And we want to keep that extension. We don't want to rename it anything that would cause it to change the extension. So you want to keep it as is. We're just making that beginning portion ransomware instead, and hit enter. We can do an ls again. And notice now that we have 5 files that are organized in a little bit better fashion with the ransomware.exe sitting right over here. This portion of the lab then has students would take it and they would move it over to the server. So they would use that same move command. They would just specify where they want to move it. I like to recommend you can also use the copy command. for this, and I say that because if they get the name of the directory wrong, so if they have a typo in the directory or they just choose the wrong path, they hit enter early, it can cause the file to be moved, and then they may lose where that file is. So if they misspell the name of the directory, it could actually create a new directory based on how they format it. Then they would either have to go to that location, try to find it, or they would have to unzip the file and go through those steps again. So we're going to use the copy command instead. And to move it over to the folder that houses all the files on the server, you do need super user rights, or sudo, the command sudo. You're going to type in sudo to give you essentially administrative rights for this one command. Command for copy is just CP. Then we're going to put ransomware. I can hit tab because it's the only one that's spelled like that. And then I have to specify where I want to move it. So it's going to be a /, which stands for root. And then it's in the directory var /www /html. And so what I can do is, just to make sure, or I'll just type it over here, sudo copy. And then once you do that, hit enter. And so this is where things are hosted when we start the Kali server, is inside this particular folder here. Once you hit that, it moves fairly quickly. We have to start up that server. This is something else that requires a sudo command. It's running on an Apache server, which is a type of service. So sudo service Apache 2, and then we're going to start it. So that's what that command stands for. So we're administrative rights, starting a service with the start, and we're starting specifically the Apache 2 server. Hit enter. It'll take about 3 seconds, and then that server will start. At that point, we've unzipped the WannaCry payload. We've renamed it to make it a little bit easier to access. We moved it over to the server, and we have started that server. At that point, you're finished inside the Kali machine. We're just using it to host, and you can switch over to the Windows machine. Any issues so far? If not, we'll move over to the Windows 7 machine. Before we actually deploy, just to show you what's inside the Windows machine, I'm going to hit start and go into the pictures folder and just show you that there are files in there. So it's just like your standard Windows machine. It comes with some demo pictures or sample pictures. If we wanted to open up, let's say the penguin, we can open it up and you can see the pictures there. So it's a functional machine currently. Its lifetime is about to cease to exist though. So open up Internet Explorer. We sometimes call it Internet Exploder. It is also known as the best browser to download another browser from. So open that up. You'll have that little tutorial window pop up. You can just close out of that. And in the URL bar, this is where you will need to type in where we're going for this. And so you'll need your Kali IP address. So if you opened up the tabs, your Kali IP address should be at the top. If you didn't do that, you can hit other machines and note your Kali IP address is right here. So you need that Kali IP address, and then we're going to add the name of the file after that. And then if you are just playing the victim today and you didn't go through the setup process, you can actually type in my IP address and it will work exactly the same. So mine's 10.15.103.46, and you do a / and the name of the file. And we named it ransomware.exe. And then we're going to hit enter. So at that point, we get a pop-up. Internet Explorer is actually trying to protect you slightly. They at least give you a warning. If you want to run or save it, we're going to hit run. We're trusting that it's safe. Plus, we're using this to show you what it does. You're going to get this other security warning that the publisher can't be verified, and we hit run. At that point, it's going to start installing, and it doesn't look like too much has happened. But notice text does pop up, so I'm going to go ahead and close this. And then you'll see that pretty quickly, the WannaCry payload has deployed. You'll get this other window that says, do you want to allow this program to make changes to the computer? Honestly, at this point, it actually doesn't matter. I'm going to hit no just to see, and the text is going to disappear for a little bit, but then it pops up either way, because at that point, it's already made it to the computer. It's already doing its job and what it was meant to do, and it goes in. And encrypts every file. This is the actual pop-up that popped up in 2017. Maybe a little bit different wording. The Bitcoin address here no longer works, so it doesn't go to Jeff's Bitcoin wallet or my Bitcoin wallet. It doesn't help fund any of our resources, and so it goes essentially to nothing right now. But this is what people saw. This is what popped up, like I said, on hospital screens, different companies, different organizations. This was on their system. They had 3 days to pay the ransom, in which case the ransom would then go up. And then after a week, they threatened to completely delete the files. And then there's quite a bit of instructions here. Then they actually included things about Bitcoin, how to buy it, contact us. And so they were malicious and of course wanted money out of everybody and things like that. But they were, I guess, at least trying to be helpful on how you could pay the ransom to them. But still not the friendliest way about going. This pops up. If you close this, it will eventually pop up again. And so it gets really annoying. You can't do too much. If I go back to those pictures that I showed you earlier, even the sample pictures are now encrypted. So those, I can't open the penguin's picture anymore. Notice now it has this added extension at the end. And so it is pretty much locked down. So it doesn't know what to do with that. So I can't look at the penguins or the koala or anything else anymore. At that point, this machine is pretty much bricked. I can keep closing it and going away. Unless you have that decryption key, there's no way to get those files back. And so any questions about that?
How would let's say you paid the ransom, how they would send you something?
So in an ideal world, if you did, and of course there's no, just because they say they're going to give your files back doesn't mean they actually have to give their files back. But in some cases with ransomware, if you paid the fee, they would essentially send you another piece of software that would decrypt it. And so it would then run through the system, take all those files that were encrypted and basically just turn the encryption off. It would decrypt them and give those files back. Doesn't happen that often though. But I like to tell people if ransomware is still going on, is something that's been around now for several years, if it wasn't working and people weren't paying the ransom, then they would have just stopped doing it. So there are groups out there that are obviously paying the ransom. Otherwise, we wouldn't see it as much as we see it currently.
It didn't it like just hit the car industry?
Yes.
They just got hit with ransomware, right? So they actually paid the ransom, right?
I'm not sure if they did or not. So it hit essentially what we call it is like a vendor attack or a I'm just messing around here and going through this. So if you hit go through the decrypt process, it kind of gives you an idea. So pay now if you want. So you hit OK and it'll kind of go through some things. So you can play around with it. But yes, for the car industry, so it hit a third party. So it hit an actual company that created a piece of software for the car industry. And so when it hit that program was used for a few things. The car industry appears to have put most of their eggs in one basket, which is never the best thing to do when it comes to cybersecurity and technology. So the software was used not just for selling of vehicles, it was really used in their service departments. So say you had an issue with your car, you go to the service department and you say, you know, I need a new water pump, or, you know, something's wrong. And they say, well, you need a new water pump. That dealership would pretty much say that we have a water pump somewhere, but one, we can't open a service ticket. We may not know where that water pump is stored in inventory based on the size of the dealership. And they also couldn't really work with their employee. It lost access to some of their employment records, so they couldn't track who was doing what, or who was working on things. And so it shut down some of your larger dealerships, like just pretty much put them to a screeching halt, because one, they couldn't perform sales, they couldn't keep up with employee records, and they couldn't even do service jobs. So anything that required maintenance and stuff like that. So it was pretty big. I forget that. I know the estimated cost is now drastically gone up, and it hit different dealerships. And so it varies. Last year in 2023, there were a few others, big ones that were hit. There was some produce. There was a produce company hit that shut them down. They couldn't essentially fulfill orders. It completely shut them down for about a week. There's been a few other places hit. We've had one of our local districts has actually been hit with ransomware before, and a couple other things. It's pretty big in the news now, and happens quite often. So with that, we kind of have to push for look for the signs that you could be getting hit with ransomware and try to be proactive, backing up your files and being able to recover from something like this. Because in this case, this machine is like, you can't do anything with it. If I try to decrypt it, it's still going to ask to pay. So you don't get that decryption key until you pay, and that's if they're a friendly hacker. If they're not a friendly hacker, they're just going to run away with your money.
And
But,
I've heard too that sometimes it decrypts some files, but it's not written well and it doesn't decrypt others. And there's no like software support on this.
Yeah, it's not like you can just call up Geek Squad and say, you know, I got this decryption key from my ransomware, but it didn't recover all of my files. They're not going to help you with that if you did get something. And then also, who's to say that, yes, they decrypted this time, but they know that you were a victim. Perhaps they install either a backdoor or a way that they can just essentially initiate the ransomware or a different form of the ransomware 6 months down the road and hit you with the same attack, because now they know you're going to pay. So essentially, why not just keep attacking you and having you pay over and over again?
So you mean they actually keep another copy of the ransomware
Yes,
on
so
their system?
they could. There's a chance that they could do that. So for instance, the WannaCry went through a few different versions. And so it even went from like WannaCry to, I believe there was one that says WannaLove. But there were several different versions of it, and it changed. So even after it was stopped initially, after the large attack, there was another form that showed up shortly after that using similar exploits that hit some of the systems that did not update even after this attack.
Wow.
So it was a pretty big attack. And if a company hasn't backed up their files, or they run the risk of just losing everything. I mean, it could be, you know, a loss of millions. It could end up resulting in a complete shutdown of that company. And so that's why you end up having some people who do pay the ransom, hoping they get their files back. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. It kind of varies.
Well, I think a lot of them pay it because to restore an entire system sometimes can be a week.
Mhm.
And sometimes if you could just uncrypt it, that's a matter of a couple hours, right?
It just varies to how big of a system you're talking
You're
about,
talking about, yeah.
and like you said, even a recovery. So even if you did have a full backup system in place, it's going to really matter on if you have on-site backups, if you have off-site backups, cloud backups, and in how big the company is. If it's say a very large company that has multiple sites, but it spreads throughout the entire system, that's a massive amount of data to try to recover.
Now, how did you get the WannaCry?
Great question. So now that um, it's pretty much been out, it was patched, so all the software was updated and things like that. So the only thing that it actually would be able to infect is a specific Windows machine. So the one that we have loaded on the range is meant to be vulnerable to it. But the WannaCry virus is actually now part of an entire, I guess, repository of pieces of malware. This one, I believe, comes from what's called the zoo, and you can actually do a Google search for the zoo
You
malware
said
repository, and it
you
pops up on GitHub.
you said the zoo?
The zoo, yes, and it actually has several different pieces that are um, useful for teaching educational because they're going to run on software that is now out of service date. So it's nothing that runs on anything current.
Wow, okay. So it would be like for Windows 7 and stuff like that.
And older. If you look at it's actually a really big file. So if you try to download it, the machines in the range actually have access to GitHub. So on Kali, you could actually do um, a git pull and pull the zoo, but the package is so large that it will actually be unable to download every file. So it'll get about halfway through downloading the files, and then the Kali machine will probably freeze up because it runs out of space.
Wow.
It's a few gigs in size. Any other questions?
And
All right, so that was WannaCry and ransomware. So it's one of those things that is pretty scary when it comes to cybersecurity, malicious activity, being a victim, and things like that. So again, being proactive. Of course, hopefully no one would ever click on a file that is called ransomware.exe. That would be step one, but looking for malicious links and things like that. So when we clicked over here and so I can still use Internet Explorer to show you some things, even though WannaCry is on here. Hopefully you would never click up, and yeah, it's gonna mess up. It's gonna like override. Um, you would look at the links that you're clicking on. If I can get this window to show up in front. It's really annoying, that pop up. But checking links. So if you get a suspicious link in an email, do things like hover over it with your mouse. Don't just assume that it's safe, even if it comes from somebody you recognize. Nowadays, it's getting easier and easier to spoof emails, make it look like it's coming from a contact that things like that. There's also the fact that it very well could come from someone because they could have fallen for something. So if someone has taken over an account, someone someone at the school, district, something like that. As a teacher, and I'm sure I remember getting emails all the time. If it wasn't like educational companies trying to like get me to use something in the classroom. It's emails from you know, your regular district emails, your school emails, all the email blasts that go out. You have parent emails or, you know, students emailing about assignments. So you get a ton of email all the time. Uh, so it's being mindful of what's in that email and making sure that it's actually what you think it is. So if you ever get something that I always say it's better safe than sorry. If you get something and you have a link in it, make sure that person is actually sending that link. If that means, you know, having to message them separately, you know, talk to them in person, call them, things like that, just to be sure. Because it is something pretty dangerous and it is hitting things. And you're starting to see ransomware in places that are you wouldn't expect it. You know, you would expect it to hit like a bank. Somebody, you know, they're trying to get money, but now it's hitting things like schools, companies that are responsible for like selling goods, production of goods and products, service industry, hospitals, because one, they're probably probably have less security practices just because they don't expect to be a victim for them to be aimed at. But also there's so many things that are interconnected between those systems. So we were going to cover a second case study, but we ran over, which is fine. The second one we were going to talk about was pen testing. So going into, just give you a brief overview. It is one that's interesting. So with pen testing, it helps you prep your system. So an organization can have someone come out and consult them on their system, perform a penetration test. It's essentially a way to test this system for vulnerabilities. They can do various different things. They can do everything from physical security, trying to get access to maybe a room, a building, to the physical devices, things like that, to actually then getting into the network and getting into the system. So I encourage you to read this one on your own. This one talks about, it's actually 2 articles together. They're fairly short. It talks about 2 pen testers who are hired to test a court system in Iowa. Of course, doing this type of job, there's a ton of paperwork involved in contracts, because you have to essentially say that you're going to allow me to test your system and possibly hack into your system, but I'm not going to do anything to destroy the system or anything malicious. And so it talks about 2 particular ones, Justin and Gary, who had all their paperwork together, but they go into this one courthouse, they get in and they end up being arrested. And there ends up being a conflict because they were trying to get into the court system when the people who hired them was the state. And if you're familiar with how the court system in state works, the states don't necessarily have jurisdiction over individual counties, or in Louisiana, we call them parishes, just due to the French history. But since the state didn't have jurisdiction, the 2 pen testers are actually arrested and formally charged with a few things. First off, breaking into a court itself was considered a felony. And so it goes through all the legal problems they had, and there's some follow-up with that. The second article talks about a guy who was performing a penetration test on a company outside the US without their permission. He doesn't do anything malicious. He reports his findings. They basically send him a cease and desist, tell him not to do anything, and he continues, and then they arrest him. And it ends up that for the 2 guys that were arrested initially, they end up having, you know, not going to prison or anything like that. So their paperwork and contracts saved them. The guy who didn't have any paperwork or contracts ended up having to go to prison. Then there's some questions that would go along with that, and talk about their story. The Darknet Diaries that I mentioned earlier has a great episode on the two testers that were arrested in Iowa. He actually interviews the two guys directly, and so they get to share their side of the story. But that pretty much brings us to a close. If you have any questions, here's our email. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.